Hi, this is Yvonne McNary for Central Kentucky Television, and we're here today in Bardstown, Nelson County, for the 15th annual Blooming Bardstown Garden Tour. That's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is, and we're glad to have you guys back. I think we said it's our 7th or 8th year with you guys, and 15th year in the tour overall. That's an anniversary that we can all celebrate.
Yeah, and Bill, you're a master gardener.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Bill Fell is here with me this year and every year.
Once again, back with you guys.
We got to stop meeting this way.
Oh, I think it's great to meet this way. An afternoon in the gardens together, I think it's a great way to spend an afternoon. But and hope everybody comes out next year. If you didn't make it today, and if you did make it today, come on out next year anyway.
Lots of interesting things on our list today.
Of course. Every year we try to incorporate some new stuff, and we do have a couple new things to show you this year. We have some classics, some of the best gardens around the state of Kentucky right here in Nelson County.
Wow, that's fantastic. Where are we now and what are we doing?
Well, we're at the Traws, and you may have seen the Traws on a past episode, but they truly are a super premium garden. Could be in any magazine across the country. We're going to show you some things that maybe we didn't cover last time, and one of them is his collection of Japanese maples. He has about 30 varieties of Japanese maple around the property, so we'll get a couple other views in there as we go along. But Japanese maples are, a lot of the varieties are only barely tolerant of this far north, so a lot of times they get nipped a little in the spring by the late frosts. But in general, they'll hold up and they'll come back. It's pretty rare for them to not survive the cold.
Now you said this far north.
That's right.
We're in the south, Bill.
Well, I know, but these are plants that prefer a little more warm weather. They're not tropical, but they do prefer a little more warm weather, or at least a nice even spring where you know you got winter and then the frost stops in the springtime and then it goes to summer. Not like Kentucky where you get 75 degrees one weekend and you're back to 10 degrees the next like we had this spring.
Yeah, seesaw weather.
That's right. And we've had a pretty bad impact this year from the weather. Spring blooms didn't do very well. A lot of blooms are still a little late. And we really didn't have a spring, right? We had that extended cold, late freezes, and then we went right into 90 degrees like it is today.
Yes, indeed. Well, listen, I'm noticing these Japanese maple trees. They're kind of short, Bill.
They are. They're a fairly small decorative tree. They can grow very often in the under a canopy, which I mean like a tree canopy. So they can be an understory tree. Okay. Some of the darker purple varieties, if you grow them under another tree, will tend to green up some. They won't be as deep a shade of purple. They grow fine in the sun or the shade. But when they grow under other trees, it does provide some cover for what we talked about earlier when you get those late frosts and that kind of thing. At least a bigger tree around it will kind of help. Okay.
Now the name Japanese maple here, it's a little different from our regular maple trees.
Well, yeah, it's in the same genus, Acer, but they do originate from Japan, and the Japanese, of course, have a long tradition of gardening and hybridizing of the plants that they prefer in their gardens. Of course, also think of Japan as an island, not a lot of space, so they tend to have a lot of smaller plants that fit their gardens well. Although some Japanese maples, they'll mound up to about 12 feet, and they can be, and we'll see a couple bigger ones when we go to the other side.
Okay, now we've moved to another part of the garden, and I'd like to say, first of all, this garden is 5 acres.
Yeah, the garden is 5 acres. The Traws have been working on this for a lot of years, and the two of them do a tremendous amount of work. Now, in here, Gary started out there with a larger Japanese maple, and there's some other Japanese maples mixed into some other varieties. But it's not just maples in here, and it's not just purple leaf plants. You also have some evergreens that have a lot of yellow in them. They have a couple deciduous, that is trees that lose their leaves, trees, other kinds of trees that have more yellow leaves in them. And they also have some dark greens. So what they've tried to do in this little glade here, in this little opening, is to create a big mix of texture and color in leaves. There are some flowers on the ground, but they tend to be in big bunches and a single color. But when you back up and you look over the whole thing, the star of this show is not the flowers on the ground, it's the trees, because they make a extremely unique backdrop. And I believe they had some weddings in this little spot, and you can see why, because it's just gorgeous. Yeah, you could bring people in, have them sit a good 60, 70 people and have a wedding. So
as we look over here on this side, we see they went from yellow to pink on this side over here on the other side.
Right,
the low growing flowers.
You're right, the lower stuff is pink, and then you see that in the middle is a variegated dogwood that has a lot of yellow and a touch of pink in it, and then another Japanese maple of another variety sitting here, and then a couple different evergreens down at the end. So they've got that mix of different color again and different texture, both trees that lose their leaves, the deciduous ones, and the evergreens. So nice mix.
Now, if you were going to put something together like this, would you start with the lower plants first, or the larger ones? How would you put this together?
Well, I think if you're going to site trees, then I would put the tree in first, and that's kind of the thing you got to think about the most. You don't want it too close to power lines. You don't want them too close together, and it's pretty tough. One of the toughest things people struggle with when they're putting in trees is envisioning how big it's going to get. They end up putting in 6 trees 10 feet apart, and at the time they look like they're a mile apart, but when they get to be 25 years old, they're cramped and they don't have the room to grow. Or they only plant 15 feet from a power line and they say, oh, that looks like it's a mile away from that power line. But when you look on the card or whatever, when you buy it and it says it's got a 30-foot span or a 40-foot span, it's you have to plant that thing so it doesn't end up getting lopped off by the power company in 10 years when it starts to get close to the power lines.
Wow. Lots of ground coverage out here. Lots of nice shade, lots of big trees.
Well, yeah, this was a mostly wooded lot when they first moved in. They cleared out some of it to put in to start their beds up. Of course, it's again a 20-plus year, and maybe even pushing 30 years now working on this property. So it's been a long process of creating the different rooms in the garden, like this one, and then the shady ones. And we're going to go over and look at some of those woodland areas in just a second.
Yeah, well, this is quite a commitment.
The Traws try to get out every day of the year. They say that there's 4 or 5 days a year that as just the weather's just too bad. And for most of us, there's probably about 90 days a year where the weather's too bad. So they're pretty committed. Yeah, they try to get out here whenever they possibly can. And they don't use a lot of help. I think they get some help with their leaves, and besides that, they do a lot of the work themselves, almost all of it.
Well, the flower beds look really neat.
Again, the advantage of spending years and years developing something, if you keep working the same area over and over and you keep your grass mowed nearby, then there's not a lot of opportunities for new weeds to get in. The Traws do like to use Roundup to cut down on their labor, so as we walk by, you'll see the edge of almost all their beds has been cleared, and they use Roundup to keep that clear. They've also done some other work-saving things with bricks and that to create borders, and then they just use Roundup on the bricks to keep that separate. And they like to, whatever their borders are, they try to keep them level with the ground so that when they mow with the lawnmower, they can get right up to the plants that they want to keep so that there's no trimming involved.
Wow, they've got this down to an art, don't they?
You have to. With this much property and just 2 people, you have to have it more than an art. It's a science. It is well, maybe it's both, but they're Michelangelo and Einstein at the same time.
Let's give them their props, huh?
Yeah.
They deserve it. Wonderful. Let's move on a little bit.
Let's do it.
Hi, this is Yvonne, and I'm here with Dayla Utley. And Dayla, what are you doing here? You've got some pretty ceramics out here.
We are with Bardstown for the Arts right there in Court Square in Bardstown, and I'm demonstrating today how you can take ceramic pieces that are broken dishes, things that you may have broken your heart that you did, and make something beautiful with them. Fantastic. Or you can also do these kind of stepping stones with stained glass. So that's what we're beginning today with an already preformed block, concrete block, and we will be creating a design, a pattern that will pretty much cover all of the concrete. You won't see the concrete left over.
Okay, this is what you're doing with this one here.
Yes, and you can see that we're coming up with a design here, a pattern of some sort. It's art in progress, and then once we get it glued on there with a waterproof glue, we will grout it with a concrete grout. We'll do the same process with stained glass. I've got we'll do 2 stained glass projects today, and the rest we will be doing in ceramic tile.
Fantastic.
So art for your garden.
So we can put this out in the garden.
Out in the garden.
Fantastic. This is wonderful. Now, how did you get started with this?
Oh my. I've been doing it a while. I just do it because I wanted to, actually. I'm a self-taught person, so I had some places in my house I wanted to do stained glass, and so I taught myself to do it.
Okay.
And stained glass lends itself to mosaic glass because you have scrap.
Okay.
And when you have leftover pieces, then you can make something beautiful with those as well, and you don't really have to waste glass. And so it's a there's all different ways you can utilize glass in your home and in your garden.
Okay, and you're going to be demonstrating today for all those people who come through on the tour?
We are going to show how this can be done, and it's something that just anybody can do. Just have to come and see how it's done. You can do it at home yourself.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing today.
You're
and
welcome.
These are beautiful pieces.
Thank you. I hope you can see it when it's finished.
All right. Looks like we're in the shade.
We are. We're on the shady side of the Charles property, and starting out with a big leaf magnolia, and that is a native that they got theirs from the Bernheim forest plant sale. And but as you see, they have a lot of different. They've done a 2 or 3 layer shade garden here. What they've done is they've cut the trees up high, so that all the lower limbs have been removed. So you still have a shady canopy from above, but a little bit of dappled sunshine can get through. And that allows you a wider variety of the plants that you can put underneath. And they've come back with, not all natives, but there's quite a few natives in the understory. They used a couple different ground covers in the form of lily of the valley, and they've got some really nice large ferns now. The other thing they've done is they've taken burning bushes and they have put them into topiary form. So they've cut up the bottoms and made them stand tall. I think it's something that Stephen really likes to do. There's a couple different plots of the property where he's cut them actually extremely high, like 10 feet tall, and all you have is kind of the ball at the top. So kind of an artistic feature out of a plant that normally would never grow that way, but you can do a lot of things if you just come through and clip it the way you want it to be.
Now you clip all these in season, right? You don't, if you were to get one of these, get a tree, you want to wait until it's in season before you do all this clipping and cutting.
Different trees require different things. It depends on what the tree does, right? So if you have a tree that mostly is in the landscape because it flowers, then you're going to treat it one way. If you have it because you want fruit off of it, you're going to treat it a little bit differently. And if, like on the burning bush here, doesn't really matter. You could trim it anytime you want. It's best to consult the internet or a master gardener or the extension office if you're not sure and you have a specific tree that you want to trim, especially if it's for fruit, because the fruit trees, they need a little bit extra detail and attention given to them.
Okay. Well, a lot of ground growth here. We've got a lot of the lower level plants, like you said, and we've got this wonderful one here. And those leaves are beautiful.
Yeah, they are. They said it hasn't bloomed yet. The big leaf magnolia here has been here for about 5 years, and no blooms yet. But of course, most magnolias have a big bloom of some sort, white or purple or pink. It'll be interesting to see what that one looks like when it does bloom.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Let's keep moving. We got a lot to look at today.
We sure do.
Well, Bill, it looks like we're in the jungle of the Japanese maples.
Yeah, and this is kind of a little older part of the collection. We mentioned earlier they're slow growers and they don't get really large, but there's just a beautiful example of a purple mounding variety, and he's got some green ones and other purples and a taller one there. But every tree you can kind of see in the frame is a Japanese maple. So great collection of Japanese maples that they have. And they continue to add to it. They're still looking for others, and they continue to plant them in different parts around. But this is just what it would look like as a slightly more mature patch. This one, the one we're standing next to, probably in the 15-year, 20-year range.
Wow.
You know, so, but gorgeous example.
And they make great shade.
Not a lot. Well, as we mentioned before, the Japanese maple is a little shorter. So unless we're Smurfs, you know, not the best there. But of course, again, he's planted it underneath the canopy of the larger trees, so it works really well.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, you ready to go to the next one?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right.